Hey, good people. This week we are in talking about ethical issues in supervision. And I just want to make sure that I encourage you all before I begin the lecture that as you read through the chapter content, please, 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 good people, do not overlook the case studies that are in your textbook. Take the opportunity to review those so that you have some idea of how you may see some of the issues being addressed in the text, how you may see that being applied in a case study situation. All right, so we're going to begin in talking just about what supervision is. Please forgive me as my dogs bark in the background. I apologize. But our book begins in just giving us information about what supervision is. And we know the supervision is something that is very important for those who are just beginning their career as a helping professional, but also throughout the longevity of your career. Because as you go through supervision with your immediate supervisor, you're going to have the opportunity to continue to investigate and to look into yourself, to examine your own beliefs, your values, your thoughts, your ideas, your attitudes that may hinder you in the helping process. So I don't want you to feel like that once you get that alphabet soup behind your name that you're finished with supervision, because supervision is ongoing throughout your entire career. Now, when we talk about supervision, some of the things that we look at in the helping profession would be administrative supervision as well as clinical supervision. Now, with administrative supervision, we're looking basically at the day-to-day responsibilities of a helping professional. From an administrative perspective, we're just kind of making sure that your responsibilities as an employee are being met, that you are a competent employee, and also that as you are going through working with your clients, consumers, or patients, that you are maintaining some type of communication with your direct supervisor. Now, with the clinical supervision, again, this goes a little bit further, and we're looking at four main goals that our book talks about with clinical supervision. We are doing clinical supervision, one, because we want to make sure that we maintain and protect the welfare of our clients. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean so much that people are suspecting that, oh, you're going to be going about doing something wrong or unethical. But the whole idea of clinical supervision is just to give you a base to refer back to. Your supervisor is going to be someone who is competent in the same field as you are, who is knowledgeable in that same or familiar with the similar subject matter as you may be working in. So again, this welfare check or protecting the welfare of your clients through clinical supervision is just to give you, again, that soft cushion to return to should you have any questions, comments, or concerns. The second goal that we look at when we talk about clinical supervision is that we continue to grow as helping professionals. Like I said in the beginning, supervision does not stop once you gain that alphabet soup behind your name. Once you've been working with a agency or organization for a while, that supervision is ongoing because your growth continues. Again, I need you to be mindful of something, good people. You don't stop growing, you don't stop learning unless you are planning on retiring or being removed from the profession altogether. But even in that instance, we continue to grow and learn as individuals. The third thing that the book talks about when we're looking at our goals of clinical supervision is that we want to make sure that we maintain a good performance as a helping professional. It is very important, good people, that as you go about in this helping profession, that you maintain some standards in regards to being the clinical supervisor or clinical helping professional that you have earned those credentials in. I worked very hard in gaining my credentials as a social worker. So I'm very protective, and I do function as that gatekeeper when people begin to call themselves or refer to themselves as a social worker, yet they lack the appropriate credentials. When we're talking about being that gatekeeper, it's not so much that we're saying, no, no, get back, you can't come in. But we are saying, be respectful of the skills, be respectful of the curriculum and the information that I learned and the credentials that I have before you refer to yourself as fill in the blank. For me, it's a social worker. For you, it may be a licensed clinical therapist. It may be a licensed family and marriage counselor, but whatever it may be, you have to take some pride and have some standards within the profession that you work with. The fourth and final goal that our book talks about when we're looking at the goals of clinical supervision, is to make sure that you, the supervisee, you, the worker, you, the direct worker, that you have this feeling of empowerment to work successfully with your client, consumer, or patient. When we are talking about working with your clinical supervisor, it's not so much to micromanage the things that you do, but it is to make sure that you feel competent and comfortable doing the task and the skills that are laid before you when working with your client, consumer, or patient. Now, as we go through and talking about clinical supervision, we do know that there are some ethical issues that we have to be mindful of, and our textbook goes through some of these ethical issues. One of the things that it does talk about is the competence of your supervisor. Now, when we're talking about the competence of your supervisor is one that's going to have the same type of or similar background and credentials that you may have. When we get into looking at the ethical issues relating to supervision, we want to make sure that everything that is done in supervision is similar to what is done when you're meeting with your client, consumer, or patient. So one of the very first things that we talk about in clinical supervision is having an informed consent. If you reflect back, I want to say this was probably in chapter 5 or 6 of this textbook, but either way, it was an earlier chapter when we were introduced to the concept of an informed consent for clients, consumers, and patients. As a supervisee, you as a helping professional seeking clinical supervision, you are also entitled to an informed consent when working with your supervisor. When we talk about that informed consent, there's going to be some very specific information that is shared in that informed consent. The information that's going to be shared is going to be reflective of the responsibilities of the supervisor, what that supervisor is going to be bringing to the table, and also the expectations of that supervisor or that supervision, the supervising mode, I should say. Now, your responsibilities as a supervisee, the one attending this supervision, you have to go prepared, good people. You got to go prepared to be an active participant in your supervisory session. Go being prepared to ask your supervisor what they're able to provide for you. Make sure that you use your voice, not just for your clients, good folks, but use your voice for yourself. And make sure you make it plain and make it clear, not in an aggressive way, not in an assertive way, but in a confident way of the issues that you may be experiencing and some of the things that you may need. Be open to receiving some feedback. Be open, good people, to receiving critical feedback, because that is the only way that we will continue to grow as individuals and also as helping professionals. The very last one, bullet that's on this screen, is talking about you, the supervisee, having the opportunity to talk about insecurities and anxieties. This is your opportunity, not so much for a counseling session per se for yourself, but it is an opportunity for you to talk about your insecurities and anxieties as it relates to the client caseload that you may be working with, your concerns in working with a specific client, consumer, or patient. So make sure you take good opportunity to reflect back with your supervisor, the person who's been there, done that, and probably has a few t-shirts to show you that they successfully dealt with the issues that you're bringing to the table. So take that opportunity in that supervisory role. When we get on, continuing talking about the supervisor in that supervising session, their roles and responsibilities, again, they expand very greatly. One of the things that we have to be mindful of for the supervisor is that that supervisor is ultimately responsible for you, the supervisee or the helping professional, and the role and the actions that you take while you're working with your clients, consumers, or patients. So yeah, there are going to be some things where they may call you to task on if there are issues, if there are behaviors, if there are actions that you may have taken that may not coincide with either the ethical conduct of a helping professional or the rules, regulations, policies of the agency or organization. It's not something that's going to be personal. These are things that have to be addressed because that supervisor is responsible for you. That supervisor is responsible for making sure that you, the helping professional, are current in all of your training, and also in any type of required elements that are necessary for your job performance or for your position that you hold. Also, the role and responsibility of the supervisor is to make sure that they are looking at and that they create a clear working model, or a clear um, uh, goal sheet, I should say. I'm trying to find the right word. Should there be an area of correction, then their responsibility is to establish and create some type of timeline that's going to hold not only you accountable for making corrective actions, but also hold that supervisor accountable, not again to micromanage you, but to make sure that the things that you are doing are getting you to the place where you are becoming more advanced, that you are becoming more confident, that you're going to be a more successful helping professional, that you're overcoming any obstacles that may have been presenting themselves before you, before as you were going through this supervising session with your supervisor. Now, I'm going to skip ahead. Instead of talking about methods of supervision, I want to go ahead and talk about some of the competence of your supervisors. So again, when we talk about our supervisors, people who are going to be working with us, people who are going to be talking with us, some of the things we got to be mindful of is that while this person may be asking you some very basic questions and engaging you in conversation, that to you it may seem that it is fruitless or a waste of time, there is a method to the madness behind what your supervisor is doing. Supervisors are required to make sure that you, the helping professional, as I said earlier, that you are competent and that you have the required skills necessary to be successful in working with your client base that's been set before you. So when we talk about the competence of our supervisors, good supervisors, that, as our textbook talks about, have the 4 A's that the book talks about: their availability, accessibility, being affable, and being able. When we talk about those 4 A's, we're looking at someone who is approachable, someone who is available to work with you right where you are as a helping professional, somebody who is not going to be judging you, someone who's not going to be mocking you or belittling you, but one who is going to be available, accessible, able to look at everything that's going on from your perspective and offer some critical insight, some critiques that's going to help you be successful as a helping professional. When we talk about the supervision, our book gets into legal aspects of supervision. And when we talk about our legal aspects of supervision, one of the things that we have to know and that we want to be mindful of is that with our supervisors have some very specific things that they need to be mindful of. And I'm just going to read these right out of the textbook. This is in your textbook. It says, first, supervisors must see that trainees provide the information to clients that they may need to make informed choices. Secondly, supervisors have a legal and ethical obligation to respect the confidentiality of the client communication. Just as you respect the confidentiality that is communicated with you about your client, maybe from another agency or organization that they may have received services from, your supervisor has that same obligation to you to protect your client background and information. I apologize again about my dogs barking. Third and lastly, your supervisors are ultimately responsible for the welfare of the clients that are being counseled by you, the counseling trainee. When we're talking about being a trainee in our textbook, it's looking at students having this opportunity to have supervision in the form of a practicum or an internship. When you get into the helping profession, you may, of course, not be referred to as a trainee, but maybe as an entry level clinical worker, clinical supervisor, clinical counselor. Forgive me, I'm sorry, good people, I'm getting my words all tongue-tied. When we talk about supervision in the counseling perspective, we get into the challenges of online supervision. The challenges with online supervision are the same as they are with online counseling services or therapeutic services. You have the issue of confidentiality. You have the issue of availability. You have the issue of having this one-on-one conversation with your counselor or with your supervisor, making sure that everything that is said and done is going to be effective for you, the counseling professional. So again, when we're talking about the online supervision, it is a lot harder work or a lot more challenging work, because one of the things that you're always going to be struggling with is developing and maintaining a nice relationship with your supervisor. And again, that's the similar thing to what you experience when working with a client, consumer, or patient, um, when you're doing online training. Our book gets into also additional special issues in supervision. It talks about school counselors, and it talks about multicultural issues, and diversity in supervision. These issues, really want you to spend some time in reading through and looking at the case studies that are in your textbook in regards to these two elements. Because when we talk about, and I'm going to go back, when we talk about supervisor for school counselors, you're looking at a different type of client base, of course, and services and the environment that your counselor may be working with, versus if they're working independently or within a separate agency or organization. In your agency or organization, you have a little bit more control of your environment per se. But when you're talking about working within a school system, there's not a lot of control that you have over the environment that your client, consumer, or patient may be functioning in anywhere from 5 to 7 hours during a day. So please make sure you read through those specific issues in your textbook. And when we get to talking about multicultural counseling and diversity, let's make sure that we're mindful of several things when it relates to multicultural and diverse issues. We're not just talking about race and ethnicity. We're also looking at religion. We're looking at gender, looking at sexuality. So there are a lot of different issues that come in and that are involved with multicultural and diverse issues relating to counseling. When we talk about gender issues in supervision, again, we want to make sure that as a helping professional, still on the same lines as multicultural counseling, we want to be mindful of who our counselor is. And if you are indeed functioning as the supervisor, you want to make sure that you're functioning in a way that you are presenting yourself in an ethical and respectful way across the board with everyone. And especially when it gets down to the idea of gender issues in supervision. When we talk about gender issues in supervision, we're looking at this whole idea of being in positions of authority. So we have to be mindful of the words that we use. We have to be mindful of body position and gestures that we may do with, or I should say, our nonverbal communication and the gestures that we have. Finally, when we get to this point when we're talking about supervision, supervision in the helping profession is similar to you creating a relationship with your client, consumer, or patient. It's all about relationships. And in these relationships, there has to be specific boundaries. When we're talking about supervision as a helping professional, we have to be mindful of the various roles and the behavior that's expected with the roles in any type of relationship. When we're talking about dual relationships, relationships that you are friends, but then also a supervisor. You are a client, but also a colleague. We have to be mindful of what our role is. The role is going to be the position that we are occupying and what that expected behavior is. I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit, good people. I apologize. Our role is our behavior. Our position is our status. So when we talk about our position or our status, how am I being referred to in this relationship? Am I being referred to as this is my friend, fill in the blank, or this is my colleague, fill in the blank? That position and or status is going to have a great impact on what our role and or our behavior would be. So if I'm introduced as this is my colleague, then my behavior must match that as a colleague. If we are communicating as a friend, then that behavior matches that of a friend. It's very tricky, good folks, when we talk about having multiple relationships in a supervisory position. So again, these are things that we just have to be mindful of as we go through working as helping professionals. Okay, so I went through the information in this chapter relatively quickly in regards to our ethical responsibilities or ethical issues in supervision, but I encourage you to please make sure that you read over the case studies that are in your textbook. And I'm also going to include another video in with this week's lecture. And in this video, there's going to be some information in the very beginning that talks about supervision. However, I'm going to invite you to just skip ahead a little bit in this video to where you get to the place of the role playing. There's going to be some role playing of various types of supervision, coming from the worker to the supervisee, talking about the worker bringing the client issues to the table. So there's a lot of role playing in this video. So again, it's probably going to be about 20 minutes into the video. If you just scroll on past the very beginning, then you'll get to the section where they're going to be doing some role playing. All right, good people. So I appreciate your time today. There will be, again, discussion topics ready for you. This second video will be available and posted for you so that as you go throughout reading this chapter on the ethical issues relating to supervision, you have some things that you can bounce back and forth with, some things to consider. All right, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to contact me by email or message me through the college's learning management system.